What if I told you that your biggest problem isn't the problem itself, but the way you've been thinking about it? There's something quietly destroying your peace, hijacking your focus, and convincing you that overthinking is being responsible. It's not. In fact, most people never realize that obsession feels like control, but it's really just disguised fear. So the real question is, what happens when you finally stop obsessing? The answer might change everything. And in this video, I'll show you exactly how. I would go over the same issue from 10 different angles. I'd lie in bed, eyes wide open, scripting conversations that would never happen, imagining disasters that never came. That's the trap right there. Your mind gets so good at preparing for the worst that it starts thinking preparation is peace, but it's not. It's anxiety dressed up in a suit and tie. You ever been around someone who's always talking about their problems? Now ask yourself, how often do they actually solve them? See, the human brain loves patterns. Even when the pattern is pain, even when the pattern is chaos. Obsessing over problems can feel productive. It can feel like you're doing something, but obsession isn't action. Obsession is stagnation. It's a rocking chair that keeps you busy but never gets you anywhere. I had to learn this the hard way. You start believing that if you just worry hard enough, if you just focus more on what's broken, maybe that'll fix it. Now you don't fix darkness by staring at it. You fix it by turning on the light. And the light is not a solution, it's a shift. It's a decision to move, a decision to see the thing, acknowledge it, and step around it. And the moment I stopped obsessing, the moment I breathed, instead of breaking things down for the 100th time, something strange happened. The problem didn't disappear, but my relationship to it changed. I stopped giving it power. I stopped feeding it my energy. And just like that, I started creating space to think, to move, to heal. Let me tell you something real. When you focus on a problem, the problem grows. When you focus on the lesson inside the problem, you grow. That's not just mental health talk, that's mental wealth talk. Because peace, true peace, is not about solving every issue. It's about not letting every issue solve you. Now stick with me, because later on I'm going to show you something that changed the entire game for me. A real shift that most people overlook. A mindset tool that's not flashy, but it's freedom. And once you understand it, you'll realize you were never trapped by the problem. You were just trapped by how you were thinking about it. Let's keep going. When you stop obsessing over problems, you start seeing possibilities. It's wild how clear your mind becomes when you're not constantly running worst-case scenarios like it's a full-time job. Most people don't even realize how addicted they are to their own chaos. It becomes like a security blanket. They don't like it, but they don't know who they'd be without it. I used to think overthinking was a sign of intelligence. Like, if I analyzed everything, I was being responsible. Like I was staying ahead of the storm. But what I didn't realize is that the storm was inside me. The constant replay, the endless planning, the imaginary arguments. I was rehearsing pain. And let me tell you something, if you rehearse pain long enough, it becomes performance. You start living it. It wasn't until I started letting go of that obsession that I saw the bigger picture. I began to understand something that Matthew Hussey talks about. He says sometimes the best way to solve something is not to solve it at all, but to redirect your energy towards something alive. Something that gives you power back. That's what growth looks like. It's not always a straight line, it's a release. And man, letting go doesn't mean you don't care. That's the part people mess up. They think if they stop obsessing, they're giving up. No. Letting go is strategic. It's the opposite of surrendering. It's stepping into conscious choice. It's saying, I know this is hard, but I will not drown in it. Sometimes your mind will tell you that if you stop worrying about something, it'll get worse. That's fear talking. That's not wisdom. Your intuition doesn't scream, it whispers. And when you create space by releasing that obsession, those whispers get louder. Look, mental health is not about controlling every thought. It's about choosing which thoughts deserve your attention. Imagine your brain like a house. You don't let just anybody walk in. So why are you letting that same destructive thought sit on your couch, eat your food, and tell you how to live? Throw it out. Change the locks. Call it what it is, an uninvited guest. And this is where channels like Healthy Gamer Gigi hit the nail on the head. It's not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about upgrading your relationship with stress, turning down the emotional volume so you can finally hear your own logic again. Sometimes the only reason you feel stuck is because your nervous system hasn't caught up to your new way of thinking. Keep it time, but also give it direction. You see, therapy in a nutshell isn't about fixing you. It's about reminding you that you're not broken in the first place. It's about helping you see that most of the time, your so-called problem isn't the actual issue. It's how you react to it. And when you obsess, you don't just overthink, you over-identify. You become the problem. You carry it into every room, every conversation, every relationship. Let me paint a picture for you. There was a guy I once met that was talented, kind, sharp, but he was stuck in a loop. Kept obsessing about this one business failure. They failed partnership. Something that happened years ago. And you know what he said to me? Well, I just want to figure out why I messed up. And I looked at him and said, brother, maybe the lesson is not in the mistake. Maybe the lesson is in the healing after the mistake. He paused, didn't even know what to say. Because we've been trained to dig into the fire instead of walking away from the burn. We sit there poking the ashes, hoping the flame comes back. But it doesn't. You know what comes back? The smoke, the steam, the haze. And then we wonder why we can see straight. You've got to teach your mind that every thought doesn't need a response. Every fear doesn't need a seat at the table. You are not obligated to investigate every single discomfort. Some things just need to pass through you like a breeze. Not every problem requires your full emotional investment. You've got limited energy. Protect it. And I'm not saying ignore reality. I'm saying filter it. You've got to ask yourself, is this thought serving me? Or is this sabotaging me? If it's not serving you, it's stealing from you. It took me years to realize this. I used to take pride in being the guy who could figure anything out, break it down, analyze it to the bone. But that strength turned into a weakness when I couldn't stop doing it even when it hurt me. I had to learn to unclench, to breathe, to stop over-focusing on what's wrong and start feeding what's right. And that shift didn't just help me sleep better, it helped me live better. Stay close, because what I'm about to break down next goes even deeper. I'm going to show you how obsessing over problems is often a sign of misplaced identity. And once you shift that identity, man, everything starts to change. Let's roll. Let's talk about something real, identity. Because here's the thing, when you obsess over problems, you're not just focusing on the problem. You're becoming it. You start introducing yourself like, hi, I'm anxiety. I'm regret. I'm failure. You don't say it out loud, but you carry it like a business card in your soul. This is deep, so stay with me. Most of us confuse what happened to us with who we are. We wrap our entire identity around a breakup, a job loss, a bad childhood, or a failed dream. And then we protect that pain like it's a part of our personality. But pain is not your personality. It's a season, it's a storm, it's a chapter, it's not the whole book. And let me tell you, the longer you obsess over a problem, the more it rewires your sense of self. Suddenly, instead of being a strong person going through something tough, you become a broken person who can't get right. That shift is dangerous. That shift is silent. And that shift will rob you blind. Here's something that therapy in a nutshell talks about how we often confuse coping mechanisms with our identity. You start saying things like, I'm just the type who overthinks everything, or I can't help but sabotage myself. But that's not who you are. That's who you became to survive. And guess what? You don't live in that battlefield anymore. You don't need that armor. You're walking around with war gear in a peaceful village. And no wonder you feel heavy. One of the realest things I ever learned was that healing requires subtraction, not addition. You don't need more books, more videos, more tools. What you really need is to subtract the lies you believe about yourself. Because obsessing over a problem is often a disguise for a deeper belief that says, if I let this go, I won't be enough. That's the line. That's the root. And that's what you gotta dig out. You know, I had a friend once, brilliant guy. Always had this edge to him though. Like life was out to get him. No matter how good things got, he'd find a way to turn the light off. And when I asked him why, he said something I'll never forget. If I stop being mad at the world, I don't know who I am. Look, that hit hard, because that's what a lot of us are doing. We're keeping problems alive because they give us a role to play. If I'm the victim, I don't have to risk. If I'm the fixer, I don't have to feel powers. If I'm the overthinker, I don't have to take action. That identity keeps us safe. Safe ain't the goal, but free is the goal. And listen, this is where some real growth happens. Let's flip the script. Instead of asking, how do I fix this problem? Try asking, who do I need to become to outgrow it? Because growth isn't about doing more. Growth is about becoming more. And becoming requires shedding. You've got to be willing to let go of the version of yourself that is addicted to the struggle. Now let me bring in a little healthy gamer GG mindset here. Drive. A lot talks about how we treat our minds like machines, trying to control every output. But we're not machines. We're ecosystems. And ecosystems need balance. Obsession is imbalance. It's dry. It's flooding. It's when you water one part so much that the rest of you dries up. You've got to start living in a way that honors your wholeness, not just your wounds. Because every time you obsess over something, you're feeding a fear that tells you, if I just think harder, I'll finally be safe. But that's a trick. That's the mind's illusion. You don't get to safety by thinking, you get to safety by trusting. And I get it. Trust is scary, especially if you've been burned, if people let you down, if life didn't go the way you planned. But trust is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And when you stop obsessing, you start building that muscle. Here's another picture. Imagine standing in a river. You're trying to hold on to a heavy rock. That rock is your problem. And you think if you hold it long enough, you'll figure it out. But the water's rising. You're drowning, not because of the water, but because you refuse to let go of the thing pulling you under. That's what obsessing does. Now imagine letting that rock go, not because you solved it, but because you don't want to drown anymore. Suddenly, your hands are free. Your head's above water. You can breathe again. That's the power of letting go. That's what happens when you stop obsessing. So, what do you fill that space with? Gratitude, stillness, curiosity. You stop focusing on what's broken and start building something better. And here's the truth. Most problems aren't fixed by force. They're fixed by focus. Shift your focus, and you shift your life. Now here's where we go even deeper. There's a mindset I want to hand you a key. Not just something nice to hear, but something you practice. And when you do, it starts rewiring your life in the background. You won't even realize it at first. But one day, you look around and think, damn, I'm not living in survival anymore. I'm living in strategy, in peace, in That's coming next. All right, so let's sit with this for a second. You stopped obsessing. You let the rock go. You're not drowning anymore. But now you're asking yourself, what now? Because when silence shows up after all that noise, it can be deafening. You feel it, right? That emptiness where the obsession used to live. But here's the truth, that space, that's islands. That's your power being returned to you. It's just waiting on you to decide what to do with it. Let me tell you something I wish I had known years ago. Obsessing over problems gives you a false sense of progress. You feel like you're doing something just because you're thinking about it all the time. But let's be real, overthinking is not a strategy. It's a symptom. It's what happens when you try to predict a life that can only be lived. And this is where that growth mindset kicks in. You ever seen how a GPS works when you miss a turn? It doesn't yell at you. It doesn't freeze. It doesn't call you down. It just says, recalculating. It adjusts. Keeps moving. Now imagine if you could treat your mistakes like that. Imagine if instead of judging yourself for the wrong turn, you just recalibrate. That's a whole new mental health game right there. That's not avoidance. That's emotional intelligence. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but what if I stop obsessing and something goes wrong? Let me hit you with this. Something going wrong is not a sign that something is wrong with you. Life is designed with friction, with pressure, with tension, but pressure isn't here to break you. It's here to shape you. Take a look at Matthew Hussey's work. You'll notice something beautiful in his approach. He doesn't give people control. He gives them clarity, because clarity does what control can't. Clarity lets you move with peace even when the outcome is still unknown. That's the trick right there. You don't have to control every outcome. You just have to be clear on who you are becoming regardless of the outcome. See the difference? Now, let me give you a personal insight. I spent years trying to control every narrative in my life. Control how people saw me. Control how success came. Control my family, my career, my pain. And guess what? The more I tried to control, the more I lost my peace. Because obsession isn't about what's happening outside. It's about the storm inside that refuses to surrender. Let's zoom out now. Think about some of the most fulfilled people you know, not just successful, fulfilled. I'm talking about the people who walk in a room and you feel their energy before they even speak. You know what they all have in common? They're not obsessed with their problems. They're obsessed with their process, with showing up, with learning. And here's the wild part. Most of them faced problems way bigger than yours or mine. But they decided not to let those problems become their personality. Let me drop something a little spiritual for you. There's a verse that says, be still and know. It doesn't say fix and know. It doesn't say worry and know. Be still. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is power that no one can take from you. It's the space where you hear truth, where you remember your worth. You see, most of us are waiting for the world to give us peace before we give ourselves permission to stop obsessing. But the world will never hand you peace. Peace is something you build from the inside out. It's not gifted, it's grown. So what happens next? Well, now you live on a fence. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop spiraling and start strategizing. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this teaching me? Because when you stop obsessing, you finally have room for the bigger questions. You finally have the emotional bandwidth to grow, to love, to forgive, to create. That's the next level. And it's available to anyone willing to let go of their obsession and pick up their purpose. You don't heal by solving. Heal by seeing yourself clearly, seeing the patterns, seeing the path, and most importantly, seeing that you've always had more power than your problems ever did. Because here's the truth, and it's gonna land strong: you are not the problem. You are the person learning from the problem. There's a big difference. And when you embody and when you walk like that, you move through the world like someone who's already free. Not someone hoping, not someone coping, someone owning. And I know you're ready for that. That's why you're here. That's why we've been walking through this together. Now, in the next part, I'm gonna open something special. It's where this whole thing clicks, where all the dots we've been mapping finally connect, where you stop being stuck in survival and start thriving on purpose. So breathe deep. You're not broken. You're just becoming. Let's get into it. Now let's take this all the way home, because this is where everything we've been talking about, it stops being theory and becomes transformation. See, when you finally stop obsessing over problems, you realize something kind of wild: most of those problems were never yours to carry in the first place. A lot of them, they were inherited, passed down, whispered into you by parents who never healed, teachers who projected, friends who didn't understand your fire, and a world that profits off your insecurity. Let that sink in. You've been fighting ghosts, trying to prove things to people who forgot your name, trying to control outcomes in a world that changes by the second. And now, for the first time and maybe forever, you have space to ask, what do I actually want to feel like? Not what do I want to fix? Not what do I want to prove? What do I want to feel like? That question opens doors obsession never could. When I stopped obsessing over how to win, I started learning how to live. I started paying attention to what gave me peace, not applause, what gave me energy, not validation. And let me tell you something, peace hits different when you earned it by walking away from what was breaking you. You ever notice how healthy people have a rhythm to their lives? They don't run to everything. They don't react to every fire. They respond with precision. That's not because their lives are easy. It's because they've trained their nervous systems to stop associating urgency with importance. Now that's a line worth repeating. Just because it feels urgent doesn't mean it's important. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause. You know who taught me that? Not a celebrity, not a guru. It was a young man I met who overcame intense anxiety through daily journaling. He told me, I realized I was rehearsing the worst case scenario so often. It became my identity. When he flipped the script, he said, now I rehearse the calm. I practice peace like it's a muscle. That's changed me, because what he was doing, that's therapy in a nutshell. That's what healthy gamer Gigi talks about: retraining the mind to serve you, not sabotage you. That's real. That's work. That's healing. So let me ask you now, what's waiting on the other side of your obsession? What version of you is waiting behind all that noise? Maybe it's the version of you that finally wakes up without the weight. Maybe it's the version that smiles because they're proud, not pretending. Maybe it's the version that loves again, not because they're healed all the way, but because they chose not to let pain make the decisions anymore. See, the enemy of peace is not the problem. The enemy is the obsession. The constant looping, the replaying, the mental punishment disguised as preparation. You gotta break that loop. You gotta get off the mental treadmill that goes nowhere. And you don't do it all at once. You do it by doing one brave thing at a time. Turn off the noise. Take the walk. Make the phone call. Say the thing you've been rehearsing in your mind for 3 years. Set the boundary. Let someone love you. Forgive someone who never apologized. Forgive yourself even if you're still learning how. Because when you stop obsessing over what's wrong, you make room for what's right. You start looking for proof that life can be beautiful again. You start building the emotional muscle to stay grounded when things shake. You stop chasing closure from people who couldn't give it, and you give it to yourself. This is how your story changes, not because the world became easier, but because you became wiser. There's a spiritual awakening that happens when you drop the obsession. It's like God finally has room to speak again. Like your inner voice isn't competing with the panic anymore. And in that stillness, you hear it, the clarity, the peace, the courage, the whisper that says, you're not lost, you're just returning. And when that happens, man, you're not just surviving anymore. You're aligned, the free, and it shows in your face. It shows in your relationships. It shows in how you walk into a room. People feel that difference. They don't know what changed, but they feel it. That's the power of letting go of what was never yours to carry. So the question now is this: what happens when you stop obsessing over problems? You start creating solutions. You start becoming the kind of person you were always meant to be. You stop being defined by pain and start being refined by purpose. Let me say this one last time, because I need you to hear it not just with your ears, but in your bones. You are not your problems. You are the person who is rising above them. And that rise, that's where the freedom lives. You made it this far, and I see you, I respect you, and I believe in where you're headed. Now take this moment and do something different. Be still. Be clear. We are Wisdom Recorder, your knowledge source. Subscribe and like for more content just like this, because your next breakthrough, just start with your next video.